Hello, my name is Pat Hendrickson. I am a deacon in the Diocese of Los Angeles, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. For those of you who may not know the role of a deacon or have only seen deacons that later become priests, I am finished. I am a vocational or permanent deacon, and my role is to be a bridge between the needs of the community and the parishes. In today's lesson, we see one prominent theme. God's love is to be accessible to all. God's love is meant for all. Simple enough, but apparently not always understood. As Episcopalians, what we believe is influenced by our three-legged stool: Scripture, tradition, and reason. I'm sure you've heard that before. And we take great pride in our use of reason when tackling the meaning of Scripture and our relationship with the holy. But what about tradition? Do we let tradition put us in a box? And what exactly is tradition? Is it just another way of saying we always do it this way? Do we allow tradition to be used as a means, a holy reason to build walls and keep the outside out? Not so simple after all. I know that I have been surprised to find myself often hiding in a box of tradition. Mulling all over this idea of getting outside of the box, I realized that what was clean and what was unclean is very much related to boxes. Think about it. Put your toys in the toy box. In the box, clean. Outside the box, messy, dirty. Box that stuff up and put it in the garage. In the box, clean. Outside the box, dirty. And if there's too much junk in the garage, get a storage unit. In the box, clean. Out of the box, dirty. In some ways, we've been programmed since childhood to keep it in the box. Matthew's Gospel was written to and for a Jewish Christian community residing in Antioch following the destruction of the temple and the fall of Jerusalem. The community was a mixture of Jews and Gentiles, some raised within the strictures of Jewish tradition, and some who were once excluded on the basis of that very tradition. The world was chaotic. Political and social boundaries were changing, and there was a great deal of tension over what it meant to be Jewish. This tension may be the reason that in Matthew's Gospel we see the Pharisees constantly challenging Jesus' actions and teachings as breaking with tradition. And Matthew's Jesus consistently urges for the intent of the law over the letter of the law. In the passage which precedes the one we heard today, the Pharisees challenge Jesus for breaking tradition, and he retorts, "Why do you break the commandments of God for the sake of tradition?" This question of who has access to God and who is excluded is not a new one. You may recall the story of Ruth in the Old Testament. There was a famine in Bethlehem, and Naomi and her husband and her 2 sons go into the country of Moab to survive. The sons marry Moabite women. Eventually, husband and sons all die, and Ruth decides to return to Bethlehem. Her daughters-in-law want to go with her, but she tells them, "No, stay here. Stay safe in the box with your families." And Ruth refuses and goes with Naomi back to Bethlehem. Now, tradition would keep both women on the margins of society. Naomi is a widow with no visible means of support, and Ruth is a foreigner an outsider. Yet the story gives us a happy ending when a kinsman of Naomi takes Ruth as his wife. Now, it's believed that this story was written not long after the return from exile. And during their time in Babylon, there were more than a few mixed marriages. And many of these foreigners came back to Jerusalem with their families. And way back then, there was tension between two groups. Those who said the kingdom was for everyone, and those who said the foreigners were not to be a part of normal society. There was those who insisted that tradition was only the Hebrew people who had access to the temple and to God. As a sideline, I would note that Ruth is listed in the genealogy that Matthew gives us of Jesus. In this first story today, Jesus once again mocks the Pharisees' penchant to use tradition in perverse ways to flout the will of God. And essentially, he tells them to think outside the box. And then ironically, Jesus is immediately challenged to go beyond his own understanding of tradition, to go outside the box of tradition that says the Messiah comes to save the Jews. His message of love and peace is meant for all living on the margins of society. All humankind are welcome in God's kingdom. Is this a true story, or is it Matthew's way of reinforcing his community's belief that by living according to the teachings of Jesus, you meant full inclusion of everyone? They had it right, and the Pharisees had it wrong. The Canaanite woman, as a woman, mother, daughter, possessed by demons, foreigner, stands in this story for all marginalized persons. And in so many ways, the world we're living in today is like the world during the return from exile and the world following the fall of the temple. Boundaries are shifting. There is political and social reconstruction taking place, and people are afraid of change. In many ways, we embrace the box that keeps us safe. Oh, it's a big box with room for lots of people and ideas, as long as it matches what we believe or comes within our tradition that tells us how to believe and how to act. And while not required, it is better if they look like us too. So how do we get out of this box, break with tradition, and create a new paradigm that does not include who is right and who is wrong? How do we reach out and embrace all humanity, as our bishop and our presiding bishop are asking us to do? We are meant to spread the good news. We are meant to share our beliefs. But at the same time, I can't learn to understand and accept the other, nor the other learn to understand and accept me, unless we're willing to speak and to listen. So don't be afraid to speak about your faith, but do it in a way that builds bridges, not walls. We have to learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. It's a little like couples therapy. We need to make I statements, and I don't mean statements which I've heard many times like, I respect the Bible too much to take it literally. That's kind of a backhanded way of saying you don't know what you're doing when you read the Bible. No, it's all about sharing truthfully and honestly what comes for your heart. I have found inconsistencies that make me question whether this story is real or an allegory. Somebody can hear that. I'm not telling them they have to find it that way. I made the mistake once of being a little hoity-toity with a friend of mine who's a member of an evangelical church. And sad as I am to say,